Now I'd like to address faith and religion and what is really good or not quite so good about those. There are numerous definitions of religion. I've only got a few to tell you. There's a typical dictionary definition, which refers to a belief or a worship of gods or God, or the service and worship of God or the supernatural. However, writers and scholars have expanded on the belief in God definition as insufficient to capture the diversity of religious thought and experience. Edward Burnett Tyler defined religion as the belief in spiritual beings. He argued back in 1871 that narrowing the definition to mean the belief in a supreme deity or judgment after death or idolatry and so on would exclude many people from the category of religions, and thus has the fault of identifying religion rather with particular developments than with the deeper motive which underlies those developments. He also argued that the belief in spiritual beings exists in all known societies. The anthropologist Clifford Gibbs defined religion as a system of symbols which acts to establish powerful, pervasive, and long-lasting moods and motivations in men and women, of course, by formulating conceptions of a general order of existence and clothing these conceptions with such an aura of factuality that the moods and motivations seem uniquely realistic. Alluding perhaps to Tyler's deeper motive, Gertz remarked that we have very little idea of how, in empirical terms, this particular miracle is accomplished. We just know that it's done annually, weekly, daily, for some people almost hourly, and we have an enormous ethnographic literature to demonstrate it. The theologist Anton Verdot also emphasized the cultural reality of religion, which he defined as the entirety of the linguistic expressions, emotions, and actions and signs that refer to a supernatural being or supernatural beings. He took the term supernatural simply to mean whatever transcends the powers of nature and human agency. The sociologist Durkheim, in his seminal book, The Elementary Forms of Religious Life, defined religion as a unified system of beliefs and practices relative to sacred things. By sacred things, he meant things set apart and forbidden, or beliefs and practices which unite into a single moral community called the church. All those who adhere to them are members of that church. Sacred things are not, however, limited to gods or spirits. On the contrary, people have used all sorts of things as sacred idols or icons over the years, over the centuries. Religious beliefs, myths, dogmas, and legends are the representations that express the nature of these sacred things, and the virtues and powers which are attributed to them. In his book, The Varieties of Religious Experience, the psychologist William James defined religion as the feelings, acts, and experiences of individual men in their solitude so far as they apprehend themselves to stand in relation to whatever they may consider divine. By the term divine, James meant any object that's godlike, whether it be a concrete deity or not, to which the individual feels impelled to respond with solemnity and gravity. There are other things that people said, where Paul Titch said faith is the state of being ultimately concerned, which is itself religion. Religion is the substance, the ground, and the depths of man's spiritual life. When religion is seen in terms of sacred, divine, intensive valuing or ultimate concern, then it is possible to understand why scientific findings and philosophical criticism, like Richard Dawkins' ones, do not necessarily disturb its adherents. Faith is confidence in or a trust in a thing or a person or a deity or in the doctrines or teachings of a religion or view. Having a strong political faith, for instance. The word faith is often used as a synonym for hope, trust, or belief. In religion, faith often involves accepting claims about the character of a deity, nature, or the universe, while some have argued that faith is opposed to reason. Proponents of faith argue that the proper domain of faith concerns questions which can't be settled by evidence. Other examples of faith can include empirical reasoning, statistics, past experience, and other more concrete factors such as faith in an aircraft, bridge, spouse, or a pet, and so on. Faith in holy books is not faith in God or the universe. It's faith in the words of the people who wrote those words. If a first grader wrote a book about building a drawbridge and he or she was cute and seemed sincere, would that mean we should build our bridges based on those words? Holy books were written thousands of years ago, and like a book on building drawbridges written by a first grader, they might seem appealing, especially if the first grader's parents had lots of money. People and enthusiasm to promote their words, but that first grader must still lack the fundamental engineering and mathematical knowledge to describe the mechanism and structural features of a functional drawbridge. Now, if the parents and other relatives and friends of that first grader printed and distributed millions of copies of those drawbridge instructions, there would be a whole lot of them possessed by lots of people. And a whole movement might start to build all the bridges according to the first grader's instructions, even if they were simplistic and showed a complete lack of comprehension of engineering principles. But once the bridges were built and started plunging cars and trucks to their destruction, don't you think it might be time to recall and remove those books? Look at our civilization. Look around you at our civilization. What do you see? You see the results of our following the lessons contained in holy books as defined and described by people who have their own agendas and could care less about collateral damage. They say they're following the dictates of God's or Allah's word or word of various other deities. The reason they like to follow the words of those holy books is it absolves them to a certain extent of any blame when the advice of the holy books of those who interpret them goes awry and disaster results. God was on our side, they'll shout, but there must have been too many unbelievers among us. They'll shout this to the rooftops because all of the holy books contain contradictory messages depending on who interprets these messages. And again, it absolves them in their eyes of any blame. The Nazi Party and the Italian fascists read the Bible and they thought God was on their side. The Japanese looked upon their emperor as a living God. Both the North and South during the American Civil War believed very strongly that they were favored by God and had regular Bible readings to support their war efforts. We have been duped. We've been fooled, but unfortunately, as Mark Twain said, it's much easier to fool people than to convince them they have been fooled. True faith is something we exhibit every day. We have faith in the rules of existence. We believe in gravity and that each breath we take will supply us with oxygen and that food will nourish our bodies and all other so-called natural laws work. That's true faith. We do not doubt these things. We have faith that the universe makes sense, and we must believe that there's a benign intelligence in charge. There's no need for vindication or assurances that we understand the truth because we know what is true through our consciences, and the truth allows us the freedom to be human. Be human, my friends. Be well. Make 2014 the year where the human race regains its humanity and loses its reliance on old stories and fairy tales that really logically make no sense. Thank you for listening.